Hi, I think we're live now, and this is the second mixer in a row that I've had a chance to host. Ben will be back. I'm not sure when, but he'll be back soon. But it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome my friend and colleague, Jeanne Skrocki. Thank
Yeah,
you so much for being here on Friday.
my pleasure. Oh, it's just terrific to be here and to see you, Dennis.
No, it's great. I mean, I wish we were in our living room or in a cafe somewhere. But since it's Corona time, uh, it's through Zoom. But we have a lot of fans and followers and supporters of the Pacific Symphony joining us. So I hope that all of you will please send in your questions to the chat. We have people in the background able to relay those messages to me. And if you have any questions for me or Jeanne, we're here to try to try to answer those questions. And I guess I'll just start with the first question that I have for you, Jeanne. You did not take the normal route to the Pacific Symphony. I don't know if that's a normal route, but you didn't go to undergrad for violin and then go to masters for violin and then go to New World Symphony and then audition and get into Pacific Symphony. So what was your path to your
Oh,
position now?
oh boy. It was a long one actually, because you're right, I didn't take a normal path, whatever that might be. I started out playing music. My mother's a violinist, and she started teaching me when I was 5 years old and taught me till I was 10. And I was very serious about it as a youngster. And then went on to various teachers along the way. And when I was about, well, I'd say 18 or 19 years old, actually, in that sense, early on, I was on the regular path for a professional musician or soloist. And I was practicing, 4, 5, 6 hours a day sometimes. And at about 18 or 19 years old, I guess I don't call it a prodigy's crisis or something like that. I just don't think it was that big a deal. But I did reach a point at which I realized, I'm not sure that this is what I want to do. And it wasn't because I disliked it or didn't enjoy playing the violin or love the violin. It was more that I'd never done anything else in my life. And I was 18, 19 years old. And I thought, wow, there's so much of life I haven't seen and experienced. And so how can I be sure? And so I quit the violin and decided to find out what else there was to do in life. And that eventually landed me in college. And I thought, well, I don't know what to study if I don't study music. And so I checked in with my dad, who's a retired mechanical engineer but had always worked on test programs for aircraft engines. And he also had his private pilot's license, so I used to go flying with him in his small, single propeller airplane. And so I thought, well, gee, I always liked math and physics in high school. I was good at math and science. And I thought, well, maybe, well, engineer, maybe I'll be an engineer. And oh, I like flying. So I'll be an aeronautical engineer. And that is actually exactly how it happened. And so I went to college. I went to Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, actually, and studied aeronautical engineering, graduated with my bachelor's degree, and went to work as an aerodynamics engineer in San Diego.
No, that's incredible because I mean it gives me chills just to hear that story because I can imagine I didn't know you when you were that age, but if you're on track to become a soloist and you're practicing like that, and it takes so much dedication, and then one day to be like, wait, I'm not gonna do this anymore, and to choose a totally different path. I mean, it's incredible and probably the nightmare of a lot of musicians' parents, of course. I can imagine. I mean, living in Irvine in California, you have a lot of these kids now who are so
Yeah.
good at music, but then who are so smart and they have so many other interests. Yeah, it was a little bit different for me because from a young age, I had other interests, but I
Mhm.
knew that I wanted to play violin, and that was the path. And what kind of violence was a little bit different, but yeah. So I went to college for music for violin, and then on to grad school for violin,
Yeah.
and and so it was for me, anyways. It seems like a little bit easier path, but it's an incredible story, and that's why Pacific Symphony is an amazing place because yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, there's not a lot of people like you, but there's some people like you. I mean, we have someone in the cello section who's a professor at USC, not for music, and this is incredible. And there are people like that all over the orchestra. And I think
And
it's a really special place.
when I graduated, I took a job in San Diego at a company called Teledyne Ryan Aeronautical. And actually, dare I share this? I have a photo of me in a wind tunnel that was huge, enormous, because as an aerodynamics engineer, we did wind tunnel testing
Oh
there.
God.
We did wind tunnel testing of drones. I was working on drones at that time. In fact, these were the like original precursors to the drones that
Wow.
are used today. And so this is standing in in a wind tunnel, which is where you test the aerodynamic capabilities of models. And this is standing in that tunnel at General Dynamics down in San Diego. And and the reason that the company was Teledyne Ryan Aeronautical, it was originally Ryan Aeronautical, and Ryan Aeronautical, way back when, is who built the Spirit of St. Louis. If you've
Wow.
ever heard of that aircraft.
Incredible.
So,
No,
uh,
that's amazing.
yeah, pretty cool. So, uh,
and and
younger,
what got you,
younger days, younger
yeah,
days.
and what brought you back to music? How, and then what led you to a career back in music?
Well, so I worked at Ryan for about, I think it was about 3 or 4 years. I loved it, by the way. I loved my job. It's a very small company, and there were only two of us in the aerodynamics group. And it was myself and my boss, Arnie Ochen, who was an absolute genius at aerodynamics. And so I lucked out because he was a genius. He was very good at what he did, and he did not mind sharing it. And so I loved my work there. I learned so much from him, and he allowed me tons of opportunities. Unfortunately, as things were in those days, the aviation aeronautical industries all, they would peak and you'd need lots of employees, and then it would dive and people got laid off, and I was one of the last hired, so I was one of the first let go. So after about 3 years I was let go from that job. And so I really was sort of faced again with another decision. My life has been all decision points, Dennis, but really interesting ones. So I'm not ungrateful. Uh, a decision point: what am I going to do? Do I look for another job here in San Diego, or what should I do? And at that time, my first husband and I, we were living in San Diego. He was a pilot for the Navy over at North Island, Coronado, and he was retiring and going into the reserves. And we thought, this is the perfect opportunity for us. We had the chance to go overseas. And we went to Mozambique, Africa. We lived in Africa for 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, you may not know this part. I'm not
Mm.
sure. So my husband was a pilot, and so he was flying for this company called AirServe International, and they provided aircraft mechanics and pilots for countries all around the world that were in need of transportation for the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, or needing to operate food lifts for countries that were having famines, or things like that. And so we ended up in Mozambique, Africa for 2 years, and he flew for them. And I actually worked in the office there and did a lot of the flight following, which means I was on the radio with our aircraft to make sure that they were where they were supposed to be and that they were safe. It was kind of a dangerous time. This is the late 1980s, a very dangerous time in Mozambique. Actually a lot of gunfire on the outskirts of the city at night. So that'll give you an idea. And so we ended up there, stayed 2 years. I loved it. But our time was up and we came back, and we ended up in Redlands, California, which is where AirServe's headquarters were at the time. And my husband took a job as the like international head pilot. And so here I was at another crossroads, and I was back in the LA area, Southern California, and I thought, wow, it's been, let's see, at that point, Dennis, it had been almost 10 years
Right.
since I had played, lots of violin. And I was back in town though, and there were a lot of friends from when I was growing up that were still here and still around. And I thought, gee, I have an opportunity to go up to Lake Arrowhead. And one very dear friend who actually had also studied violin with my mom, Roger Wilkie, was soloing with one of the local orchestras. And I thought, I'm going to go up and see him and say hello. And so I went up to see the concert, and afterwards, hi, Roger, how are you? What's going on? And he says, Jeannie, what's happening? What are you doing? And I said, oh, I just got back from Africa. I don't know. So you're going to love this part. I always tell the story. Dana Freeman, who is one of the violinists in Pacific Symphony, also happened to be playing that concert and was standing there with me and Roger, and blurts out, oh, Pacific Symphony is having auditions. You should audition. And at this point, I didn't even have my violin out yet again. And so I came back from the concert and I kind of thought that through, and I thought, well, I don't really have anything else on the horizon right now. So, okay, I guess I'll get my violin out and start practicing again. And honestly, that's how it happened. I spent 6 months playing a lot of scales and arpeggios and took the audition for Pacific Symphony and got in, and that was 1992.
This is after not playing violin for 10 years?
Yeah, this is after not playing for 10 years.
That's incredible because, yeah, I mean, not that I grew up in Korea, but I used to live in Korea and I taught in Korea, and there are very few stories like this. Everyone, you can't even audition for an orchestra if you don't have a music degree, if you didn't go to the right schools and study with the right teachers. So this kind of story is, I hope, very inspiring to anyone out there listening who's not sure about a life in music but loves music. And anything can happen. My gosh, 10 years of being away and then practicing and getting into the Pacific Symphony, that's an incredible story. And you spoke about your mother a little bit. I know you come from a family of violinists, your mother and also your daughter. Now, how does that happen?
So I mentioned that I started taking lessons when I was 5, and my mom taught me. My mother grew up in Bloomington, Indiana. And so for those of you who are into music or who have gone to conservatories and places for music, you know that Indiana University is there. And because she grew up in Bloomington, of course, she was near the university. And apparently, she tells the story that when she was about 8 years old, a little friend of hers that she used to hang out with had her violin lesson. And my mom said, can I go with you? And she said, sure. And my mom went, and I think it was the first time she'd heard a violin or something. And she fell in love with the violin. And her friend's teacher looked at her and said, Bonnie, would you like to play the violin? And when she tells the story, it's so marvelous because she said he sent her home with a violin.
Wow.
And she brought it home and told her mom, I got this violin today and can I play? Can I take lessons? And, to this day, she says she does not know why her mom said, okay, but she did. And that's how my mom started playing. And she studied, of course, and just absolutely fell in love with the instrument, studied hard. And she ended up going to Indiana University. She entered as a freshman when she was 16 or 17 years old, studied there, and eventually graduated with a degree actually in music education. She wanted a performance degree, but her mom talked her into music education. And she was concertmaster of the orchestra while she was there.
Wow.
And
Amazing.
and then of course she went on to teach. She's taught quite a lot of very well-known violinists, and to mostly teach and then of course play. And it's been her whole life. She's still at it. She still is teaching 20 or 30 students right now over Zoom. So she's an entire lifetime, thousands and thousands of young people that she's taught and that are still involved in music. So
right. And your daughter's a violinist.
Yeah, so my daughter also, from seeing me play and practice when she was very, very little, wanted to play. But I'll tell you this though, my mom taught my daughter also.
Oh, that's amazing.
So, yeah. And here's a picture of the three of us. Not too recently, maybe about nine years ago or so. This is actually at Disney Hall We were playing a concert, probably something through the Redlands University or Redlands Symphony. So obviously that's my mom in the middle, my daughter there on the right as we're looking at it. So my daughter was 2.5 when she started. My mom
Amazing.
started her. My mom's been just a tremendous teacher for really, really little young students. She teaches all levels, but especially good with that. So she taught Laura, my daughter's name is Laura, until she graduated high school. And then Laura actually chose to go to the University of Redlands, which at the time I was teaching. And so then in college, she studied with me.
Wow.
And then graduated, of course. And one of my greatest joys is that she managed to get herself on the sub list for Pacific Symphony. And so Laura has had also the joy of getting to play in the orchestra.
That's amazing.
Alongside
You
all
know,
of us.
I mean, a lot of people ask me why my kids don't play violin because they play flute and bassoon. I said I can't imagine teaching my own kid, and
It's
then I can't imagine having another violin teacher teach my kid also. So I just stayed away from that. But no, it's amazing. And it's so wonderful to see. I know we have a small clip that you did with your daughter. This is during the quarantine when it first started, when we thought it was going to be just a few weeks. But this is you and your daughter. Can you set up the clip a little bit?
Sure. So this is during over the summer, as you mentioned, with musicians from the orchestra putting together short bits of music for quarantine clips. And this is one that my daughter and I put together, and I think it was aired, it would make sense. It was aired around Mother's Day, mother and daughter. So I think we have it. Enjoy. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeanne Skrocki, Assistant Concertmaster of your Pacific Symphony.
And I'm Laura Evans. I'm a substitute violinist with the Pacific Symphony.
And I'll bet you're wondering why we're not social distancing. Well, that's because we're related. This is my daughter, Laura, and we do get to play together in Pacific Symphony, and it's one of the great joys of our lives. Today, we're going to bring you a quarantine clip, and what we're going to play for you is known as a mirror canon. It's in the style of Mozart, and the reason it's called a mirror canon and also table music is because the music is placed on a table between the two musicians, and then each of us will play from opposite ends of the music at the same time. And that means that I'm playing the music upside down from Laura's perspective, and she's playing upside down from my perspective. And I wanted to show you what it looks like so that you can enjoy this even more. Watch, here we go. Presto changeo. Ta-da! So we hope that you enjoy this little offering of table music today. that again. Lots of chords, huh? Too many chords.
um, I always worry that when we're doing these things that we're just the two of us talking to each other and no one's watching, but there's lots of people watching.
Oh,
And we have a question from Mr. Bill Beck. What is your role at Pacific Symphony as assistant concertmaster?
Oh, great question. Terrific question. So in our orchestra, the assistant concertmaster sits third chair. So that's right behind Dennis. That's my official position. And the assistant concertmaster is there. First of all, our associate concertmaster, Paul Manister, sits in second chair. Obviously, if Dennis isn't here for some reason, then Paul moves over and becomes the concertmaster and I sit second chair. If he's not there either, then I move over and occasionally get to play concertmaster for the orchestra. I feel like my role in third chair is a support role, first of all, first and foremost. So I'm supporting the stand in front of me and Paul and Dennis. But it's also a leadership role in a way. Because of the fact that I'm sitting right behind Dennis and I'm sitting on the outside of the stand, I feel that my responsibility is to be sure that I mirror everything that Dennis does as carefully as possible. So that from a visual perspective, from the back of the section, if somebody can't see Dennis and they can see me, then they can follow that, although I'm not leading the section, Dennis is. So I think that's my main role. I very infrequently have any kind of solos. Once in a while, I get to join the two of them if we have three parts. But I feel like my role is mostly to support Dennis and to support Paul on the first stand.
And that's the official role, but on a personal level, she is the mother of the first violin section. She is the one who we go to for advice and for cookies sometimes. But no, she's being very humble. And when she sits next to me, and when she said this to me and to others, I mean, it's so meaningful. And she said, "My job is to make you sound good. My job is to make you feel comfortable so you can do your job." And this kind of supportive role is amazing. And as you can imagine, not all assistant concertmasters, associate concertmasters have this kind of attitude. So having Jeanne near me, beside me, anywhere in the orchestra is such a blessing to the whole orchestra, but especially to me. I feel really comfortable playing next to Jeanne. Paul had some hand issues for a while, so for many weeks I sat with Jeanne, and it was really, really fantastic. You know, everyone is a professional, first of all, and everyone's an amazing musician, but some people, you know, feel music the same way, maybe because of the training, but the idea of fingerings, bowing, sound production, all these things, I feel very comfortable when I sit with Jeanne. So I'm grateful to Jeanne, and when Alexi asked me, you know, who I wanted to interview, you know, Jeanne came to mind. So I'm really grateful that she's here. And you know, I wish that, like I said, I wish we could be on stage and not having to do these Zoom meetings, but that's where we are. You studied with someone kind of famous, I would say. I'm going to show you my ignorance and maybe a little bit of my age, but when the great Jascha Heifetz passed away, I didn't know. And my school teacher, my homeroom school teacher, who was not a musician, told me, and he knew I was a violinist. And I was like, who's that? And I mean, and almost immediately after, when I asked my teacher, I was so embarrassed that I didn't know who Jascha Heifetz was. But you had a chance to study with Jascha Heifetz, which seems to me like it's like you studied with God. Can you tell our audience what that was like? I mean, there's so many stories about Heifetz, but what was that like to study with Heifetz? Were you terrified? I mean, go into as much detail as you'd like.
Yeah, it sort of was like studying with God. You know, and Dennis, especially for me, because you know, my mother's a violinist, and I all I remember from my childhood is, like I mentioned before, playing violin, hearing we had my stepfather at one point was also a very well-known musician, so we had chamber music in our home with all of the famous string players. You know, twice a week. I was turning pages for pianists when I was 8 years old. I completely grew up in a musical environment, and so part of that was that my mother, who with her love of the violin, was always playing violin records at the time. and lots of Jascha Heifetz. So I grew up hearing him, and I remembered as a very young child thinking, I'm going to study with him one day.
Oh.
So let this be, for those of you watching, and especially young people watching, let this be an encouragement to you. You know, in personal development, you hear, keep the thing that you want right there in front of you, you know, act like it's happened, say it over and over, whatever it takes. Well, I kind of did that. I said, I'm going to study with him someday. And the opportunity came when I was 16. My teacher, the violinist, his name was Manuel Kempinski. He also taught a lot of very, very well-known people. He heard that Mr. Heifetz was holding auditions for his next class, and he contacted Mr. Heifetz's assistant, Yukiko Kamei, at the time, and set up an audition for me. I worked with Yukiko for an entire summer to get all of the scales and octaves and tenths and thirds and sixths and whatever else ready for the audition. And so at 16 years old, I went to audition for Mr. Heifetz. The audition was at his home in Beverly Hills. So that studio that's at the Colburn School now was still located at his home in his backyard. And that's where my audition was. I was 16. I didn't even have a driver's license. So my mom drove me up there. She was not allowed to come in. So she drove me up there and sat in the car. I can just imagine how that felt for her. Because she idolized him too. And here her 16-year-old daughter was getting to go in and meet him. And I came in through the back gate to the backyard where the studio was near his pool. And Yukiko met me in the yard and went in, told him I was there, came back out and said, okay, Mr. Heifetz is ready for you. And as a 16-year-old, I picked up my case and I walked in the door, and I was thinking to myself, gee, I wonder what you say when you meet Mr. Heifetz. Hi, I've heard so much about you, which I did not say, by the way. No, he was entirely gracious. He was very kind, you know, obviously let me in, said hello. I got settled and proceeded to play Dennis so much music. So much music. I had Sigan, I had Mendelssohn, I had Tchaikovsky, I had Paganini Caprices, I had all the scales and arpeggios in every key. It was just craziness. But I was well prepared. I had been well prepared by all those who helped me in my own practice. And it turned into essentially a lesson of about an hour and a half. I have to say, much as I idolized him and was terrified, he also really put me at ease. And he had heard from Yukiko, I guess, that I also played piano. So I, at that time, was also studying piano and practicing almost as much as the violin. Thankfully, I had just given a recital, a piano recital solo, all memorized, and he asked to hear me play piano. And so I sat down at the piano and started to play, and he ended up actually hearing my entire recital.
Oh my gosh, incredible.
So I was there for a very long time. But you know, by that time and having to do all of this, and it became, as I said, a lesson and just a, you know, here we are, he's coaching me. So I actually became quite comfortable, and obviously he accepted me into the class for the next year. And there were 5 of us. I was the youngest. There were only 5 in the class at USC. So he was at USC at that point. Yes, it was probably the hardest musical thing I've ever done. Certainly terrifying. We met twice a week with him, and there were only 5 of us. And he didn't like to hear the same thing over and over and over and over. So the amount of repertoire that you had to have prepared was enormous. And it was really difficult. It was very hard to keep up, but it was amazing. it was breathtakingly amazing. And this is for me personally, because I had grown up listening to him, and I had said, I'm going to study with him. And I was studying with him. And so just being in the same room, and he played for us all the time. He, you know, from 6 feet away from me, here's Heifetz playing, and he would demonstrate new things that he put in his library or suggestions that he had of pieces that we might play. I think one of the highlights of the year actually involves the piano. He came in one morning. We started at 9 a.m. and he came in one morning, and as he always did, he walked to the piano and he put his case down and opened it up. He gets his instrument ready, and then he turns and he goes to the library, and he had a file cabinet, the library in the corner, and he pulls out a piece of music and he says, "Here, I'm going to play this for you." And to be honest, I don't remember what it was now. It was not something I was familiar with. And he took the violin part out of it, and then he takes the piano part and he walks over to me and he says, "Here, you'll accompany me today."
Oh gosh. Sight
Yeah,
reading.
yeah. I just about fell out of my chair. I could barely swallow. And I took the music. It was not something I knew and not something I know now. And I remember quickly kind of looking at it as I walked over to the piano, because you didn't say no to Mr.
Mhm.
Heifetz. And I thought to myself, I might miss some notes, but he's not going to lose me.
Mhm.
No matter what happens, I'm going to stay with him. And I did. And it honestly was probably one of the highlights of the year. I got to
Mhm.
accompany Mr. Heifetz.
And that led you to a life of engineering.
Interesting. Yeah.
I mean, this is an honest question. What did your mom say, and what did Mr. Heifetz say when you said, "I'm not going to play violin anymore"? I can't imagine that conversation.
Oh, so the conversation with Mr. Heifetz here again is an example of, um, he has such a reputation for being,
Mm,
so hard, and there are many people who I think didn't maybe have as good an experience studying with him as I did, but for whatever reason I did. And so when I gave him the news that I was not coming back to the class, he was actually, I think, disappointed. I think he was sad and he was disappointed that I was not coming back. Um, and and I'm sad and disappointed in hindsight that I did it that way, that I quit. um, but I'm incredibly grateful that I got to come back, because
right.
over that 10 years that I was away, of course, then it is the time that I realized, ah, yes, this is it. I've done other things, this is what I want to do. And my mom was, I do not recall any sense of, wow, anger, how could you do this, what are you thinking. My mom was supportive from start to finish, even though I am certain, because I'm a mom of a violinist, I'm certain that there had to be a lot of sadness and, oh, what are you doing. But she
So,
supported me.
so you don't have an Asian mother, I guess. No, I can't imagine. I just can't even imagine. I can't imagine bringing it up, and what parents would have said. Oh my goodness. Um, I've now started a little bit in the studios. I've played in a few things, but I know you've played in every movie that everyone's ever heard of. Um,
Not that
and
many.
I know that there's pictures of you and John Williams, and you were on the Star Wars stuff. Um, Give me some highlights of your time in the studios in Hollywood.
So, it was marvelous. I just had the greatest time. I had about 20 years, a good run of it playing in the studios. I got to start because at the time I auditioned for Pacific Symphony, the concertmaster was a violinist by the name of Andre Granat. And he, at the same time, was also one of the main concertmasters in Hollywood for studio recording. And so he heard my audition. Actually, it was the audition for assistant concertmaster. When I first got into the orchestra, I was 15th chair, first violins. I took another audition 6 months later and I moved up to 14th chair, Dennis. Big moves. Then another 7 months later or something was when I got assistant concertmaster. And he heard that audition, of course, he was there. And it was after that audition, I got this phone call and they said, "Hi, Jeannie, this is the Dateline. We have a film call for you. The movie is Free Willy, and it'll be at such and such a studio at such and such a time." And I remembered thinking to myself, Dateline, what is that? I didn't even know. I didn't know the call was coming. Apparently, Andre Granat is the one who who was responsible for getting me on a list to play in the studio. So first movie was Free Willy, whatever, however many years ago that was. I guess that would have been 1993 or something, 3 or 4. And so from there, once you play something and then you begin to get known and you play more and more. So I eventually worked my way onto John Williams' list. I've mentioned Roger Wilkie. Actually, there's a photo too of me with John Williams, and Roger Wilkie's in there. Roger Wilkie was a student of my mom's, and he is the concertmaster for John Williams. And so I was very fortunate to sit on first stand with Roger
Wow,
for
amazing.
Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull.
Oh my gosh.
And it
Incredible.
was amazing. And what was particularly amazing about this, so this is really one of the highlights of my studio career, was that I remembered seeing the original Raiders of the Lost Ark when I was just a teenager. And so it was about 2 weeks, the whole scoring session for Crystal Skull, Indiana Jones, was about 2 weeks long. And here's a picture. This is actually Pacific Symphony. And when in a summer concert, when we played Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I believe I was concertmaster for this one. This was before your time, I think, Dennis. I was concertmaster for this. And what's really cool about this particular concert of Raiders of the Lost Ark with the film showing is that this was the first concert that my daughter played as a substitute.
Oh, wow.
So
Awesome.
it was really fun. That was a fun time. And then there's another photo of me with John Williams, I think. And if you can pull it up. And at any rate, when we did Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, we came in the second week on Monday morning at 10 a.m. And I walked in and I was sitting first stand with Roger. And I walked in and the original score from Raiders of the Lost Ark was on the stand because we were going to re-record that music. And so here I was, so many years later, playing the music that I had listened to in Raiders of the Lost Ark when I first saw the film when I was a teenager. So from that point, I actually from before then and on through, I was always on the John Williams calls. This photo is John Williams, and to the left of me is Yo-Yo Ma. To the left of Yo-Yo is Roger. So Roger is John Williams' concertmaster. And then on the other side of John Williams is Renee Mandel, who was a violinist in town. He also studied with my mom. So Renee and myself and Roger all studied with my mom. And this photo was actually taken for Memoirs of a Geisha. So this was the recording session in Royce Hall at USC. We're actually out in the middle of the hall. They built a huge platform over all of the chairs and positioned the orchestra out there because they felt like it was the best sound. So, really working with John Williams, I think, doesn't everybody say it? I mean, working with John Williams was amazing. Such incredible music, such a gracious man, such a wonderful, respectful atmosphere, both directions. So that really was, I'd have to say, was the highlights. I also loved playing for Pirates of the Caribbean. Those were
amazing.
Those were super.
These are movies that everyone has seen, so it's amazing that you were on the original. It's amazing. I similarly, when I first moved out here, people said, maybe they'll call you. You don't know how it gets started, but maybe it'll happen. And similarly, I didn't know what Dateline was, and I kept on getting these emails saying Dateline, green eggs and ham. I was like, what is this? This must be spam. And I got it maybe 10 times, and then finally I read it carefully. I was like, wait, what is green? And I called. I was like, what is this green eggs and ham? They're like, oh, this is a recording session. Are you available? I'm like, green eggs and ham? And I felt so stupid because they were doing a new movie or something about green eggs and ham. And that was my first time going there. And as you know, of course, and to go into details, but it's a totally different world. You go there, there's no seating, and everyone is a little bit nervous and everyone's quiet, and it's certainly a different atmosphere than Pacific Symphony. But I had a chance to be on the last Star Wars movie, so I thought of you, Jeannie.
And see, I did not get to do any of the Star Wars movies, so I'm jealous of you.
Yeah, and not only was John Williams conducting, but Lynn Harrell was playing principal cello.
Oh,
so
my goodness.
incredible. And to look around and see these people, and and I guess a lot of them had done a lot of stuff with John Williams, but for me, I was just sitting there, just a kid in a candy store, and I was just in awe of the situation. And of course, the actress even came to one of the sessions, and she sat there for 6 hours. It was incredible. She just listened to the music, and to be honest, it sounded amazing.
Yeah.
As you know, I mean,
Yes.
no click track, and people were just playing their hearts out, and John Williams is on the podium, and you're playing this great music, and it's going to be for this great movie. So no, it was amazing. It's certainly not like it was when you were doing it, because it's a lot less work, of course, now. I heard stories not only because of COVID, but even before COVID, everything is getting smaller and online and Netflix and stuff.
Yeah,
So,
sadly.
but it's still an amazing thing, and I know a lot of our Pacific Symphony colleagues do that stuff. So no, it's you're one of the senior members, and to hear your stories is amazing.
Dennis, I can really relate to what you're saying there about the kid in the candy store. It's really true. And I sometimes thought, wow, this is just kind of silly. But I mean, I would come home and just, say to my family, I sit there and I cannot believe what I'm hearing around me. The level of performance, the skill, the musicianship, just on what an amazing
No,
place.
it's funny, like especially when I went back to Korea this time, I have relatives who are not musicians and don't know anything about music, and they know I have a job, and they know I went to a good school, and I have a nice instrument, and I tell them, I played on Star Wars. Like, oh my God, you played on Star Wars? You must be really good. And it's and it also works with little kids. My girls are very impressed that I played on Jumanji and Toy Story. So no, it's cute, and no, and it's amazing that the history, what you've seen and what you've recorded, I can't imagine. You must have, I mean, we could do this Zoom for 10 hours. We have a question from one more listener. How is teaching music via Zoom been? Any surprising positives from this new form of pedagogy? Do you teach now through Zoom?
I do. I only have a handful of private students now. I mentioned teaching at the University of Redlands for many years, and I resigned from there in 2000. It's not been that long, 2017. So 4 years ago. And I kept a handful of private students, and yes, I have been teaching them over Zoom. I have to be honest. The convenience of Zoom is wonderful.
Right.
For the students, because they're not having to drive, in LA traffic or whatever to get to me and all of that. Okay, so that's nice. So scheduling, I've found, is a lot easier with Zoom. But I have to be honest that trying to teach lessons over Zoom is not a very wonderful experience.
Right.
And you know that too, I'm sure. It's just difficult. The sound is so different, even with outside microphones and separate equipment and settings and all of that. Even if you get it all dialed in really well, it's really hard to hear. You don't have it's like anything we're doing right now, where we don't get to be together. Even this right now, there's this barrier, there's this wall. We're not together. I don't get to play with students in the same way. Actually can barely play with them over Zoom. It's just too hard to do. If I play, I can't hear them, and they play, they can't hear me. So it's been difficult. It's been very difficult. Now, that being said, I'm grateful for it because it's better than nothing.
Right.
But I have not enjoyed it. I've not enjoyed it.
It's a very politically correct way of answering. I will answer it. It sucks. It's horrible. I can't wait for this to end, because it's music should not be taught or listened to, or this is not the way to do it. And like you said, also, I'm grateful that, that we didn't have to stop everything, and my students are still with me, but it is horrible. And I can't wait till the day that things loosen up and we can teach in person. I have an interesting question from somebody. This was even before our Zoom. It looks like two of you are always sharing one musical score. This is when me and Jeannie sat together. Does each of you look on the page closest to them so that the two pages that are open in front of you are the same? If not, then the other page seems fairly far away and could cause vision issues. Is that a fact? I can answer, but let's start with you.
Okay, all right. So yes, we are sharing the same piece of music that is, it's not, same thing on this side and this side. It's different music on each side. And so you're correct. You've got it right. We're looking at an angle. If I'm sitting with Dennis, I'm on the left side, so I'm looking over there to the right, and then he's over here and he's looking that way. And you're correct. It can be difficult to see the page that's farthest away, and there's there's quite a bit of furniture moving that goes on, chairs, stands, how high is the stand, who's got more of it, who's got less of it,
Absolutely.
who likes more of it, who doesn't want much of it. It's a real exercise in team effort.
I had a funny story in Finland. This is when I was when my vision was not, it was going badly because of smartphones and all of this, and age, of course. So I was getting a little bit farsighted, and then my stand partner was getting really nearsighted, and both of us didn't want to get glasses. So on the stand, it looked really funny because he was really close to the stand, and I was about a foot behind. So it looked like we were sharing the same stand, but it looked very funny.
Yeah.
And now I think both of us are wearing glasses when we play, but it was comical because I think a lot of people had the same question, like, are they playing the same music? Why are they so far from each other?
Yes. And
Um,
I'll say something else too, which is particular to this situation, is that, I'm sharing the stand with the concertmaster, and the person who sits for the strings, the person who sits on the inside or the left side of the stand is the one who turns the pages. And that's so that the outside player, if there's a page turn in the middle of stuff, then the outside player can keep playing and the one on the inside turns the page. And so when I sit with Dennis, that's my responsibility. It's my job to turn the page. And I have to tell you, that's one of the most nervous things that I do. I'm
mm,
always nervous about that. Am I going to be able to get a hold of it? And Dennis will tell you, he'll tell you, when I sit with him, I take all the corners and I like fold them all up. And one day he even asked me about it, and he said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And it's because I get so nervous, Dennis, that I'm going to get the page turned on time, or I might grab two or something, and cause you to mess up. So
yeah, there are some orchestras in Europe, especially in France, that the outside player actually turns the pages because it actually does make more sense. It doesn't look good, and I understand why American orchestras don't do that. But so I'm a guest concertmaster in France, and we're playing Scheherazade, and my stand partner is not going to turn pages for me. So I'm playing the solos, and I got to turn the page, and it was the funniest thing. And it was an older lady. She was like, "No, in France, I don't turn pages. This is your job." And it took some time to get used to, but
oh yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
turning pages is a special skill, and those who know how to do it well, it's really an art. The timing is important, the speed,
it is.
but it's
I'm not that great at it, actually. And my nervousness, I always feel bad because I know that you can sense that I'm nervous about it. And so then I always feel bad, but it's worked out so far.
um, I remember when I was playing chamber music at a festival, and there was this really tricky page turn in this quartet that I was playing, and I was having trouble with it. And I remember Ani Kavafian saying, "Oh, stupid concertmaster never knows how to turn pages." So
Yeah.
it's a joke, but yeah, I guess in America, anyways, concertmasters never turn pages, so it's
No.
something that we need to learn how to do.
Yeah.
Um, we have a little bit of time left. Please send in your questions. But I have one question. I've only known Carl for a few years, but I know he's been here for 30 years, and I know you haven't been here for 30 years, but you've been here a long time with him. How has he changed conducting style, personality, all these things? How has he changed from when you first met him to now?
So I first met him, I've been in, I think this is my 28th season. So when I auditioned, he had only been here a couple of years. So both of us were quite a bit younger, 28 years ago. And
But you said you were 30.
yeah, right. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm glad you asked this question because I have been here a long time, not the longest, but I've been here a long time. And I have always felt I suppose, I mean, obviously because of being near the front of the section, for all but 1 year of my tenure, I'm close distance wise to him. And I've always felt kind of, um, I've felt like Carl and I have related to each other really well, and just on a personal level have had a lot of common bonds just because of shared experiences in the orchestra. I've been here through other concertmasters and other associate concertmasters. So that's probably part of it also. I've been in a leadership role through all of this. And so Carl and I would say are very close. I'm pretty sure he would agree with that. And so I have had a chance to enjoy watching him grow, both as a conductor and personally. And as a conductor, it's been particularly interesting to see, probably not in any way that's different than how it goes for most conductors, or at least you hope so, that as he has gotten, more and more experience, and especially experience with this orchestra, getting to be with the same orchestra for such a long time. I think it's a unique opportunity for the conductor to develop and to be able to take some chances and take some risks that perhaps you wouldn't do with an orchestra that you don't know that well. And so it's been wonderful actually to see how his, I don't need to talk about technique, because every conductor has their own kind of version and their own technique and their own way of showing what it is that they want. Of course, with Carl being here so long and me being here so long, I know those things very, very easily. I see it. I see it in his hands. I see it in his face, especially in his eyes. He shows a lot of it in his face. So it's been really, really wonderful to see how that has developed, and how over time his experience has allowed him to develop a confidence, not that he didn't have confidence, but more of a confidence to take some risks and do some things emotionally, and I'm going to even say spiritually, with the music that he may not have done 28 years ago. I will say I have particularly, and this is still true, particularly enjoyed playing under Carl and getting to watch and be on the receiving end of that when he works with a choir, when he works with Pacific Chorale. There's, I think, a very unique connection that he has with vocal music, with the choir, with the voice, with that whole, I'm thinking of the Cathedrals of Sound concerts that we've done, and those things that I think is particularly moving. And from a personal standpoint, some of you may know about years and years ago, the tragedy in his family when his young son was drowned. And I knew him at that time. And so that has been an incredibly interesting journey to see how that healing took place, and how that shaped and has developed his compassion and care, and lots and lots of very compassionate type feelings and attitudes towards the musicians as people,
Right.
not just people who play for him.
Right. No, I mean, what I appreciate about Carl is, I mean, every conductor is a little bit different, and some conductors, they have a certain way of rehearsing, and the dress rehearsal is a little bit different, and the concerts again different. And with Carl, I feel like he gives 300% every time he's on the podium.
Yes.
From the first downbeat till the break in the first rehearsal. I know we don't have that many rehearsals, and we're not like a European orchestra where we have a week of rehearsals to play one program. So we have very limited time. But even during that limited time, he gives so much. He has to change shirt after each half rehearsal. Yeah. That's how much he's giving physically and emotionally. and that's why for me, when I see someone on the podium giving that much, I can't give less than what he's giving. I feel like when the boss is giving that much, if I don't give that much, why am I there? And so it's hard to just kind of sit and kind of dial it in or phone it in when the person on the podium is doing that. So that's what I appreciate. And every rehearsal, every time, and it's not only when we're doing Tchaik 6. I mean, when we're doing Lunar New Year concert, when we're doing light stuff, it's amazing how passionate he is about all music. And that's what I really appreciate in the short time that I've worked with him.
And that has been consistent for 28 years that I've been there. There's not been, actually, I can't recall one single rehearsal or concert that Carl St. Clair has phoned in. he never.
And there are times that he's been really sick, by the way, like really, like he had a cough and a fever, and he still is giving 300%. And it's really something special.
Yeah.
We have one question. I'll just paraphrase. I play some violin, and I found that sitting in the back, 9th, 10th chair, is the hardest. It's hard to hear the other violins and the rest of the orchestra. Have either of you had this experience?
I definitely have. As I mentioned, when I first got into the orchestra after not playing for so long, I was in 15th chair. So I hear you. I feel your pain. So from 15th chair, yeah, way back there. And in our orchestra, you're on risers besides. So not only way back there, but way up here. And gosh, talk about feeling like you're the only one playing on a desert island. Yeah, very, very difficult. And I have to say that I didn't enjoy it very much back there. I guess that's why I kept taking auditions to move up. Yeah, I have a real compassion for the instrumentalists that are in the back and up, especially like that, because it is so difficult to hear. You know, over time, you sort of learn where to be, you know, where to play, how loud to play. But it's a tough situation, tough way to go. Dennis, were you ever in the back anywhere?
I mean, in festival orchestras, definitely, and definitely when I was a student. A lot of orchestras I played in, there's been rotation, so it's been even more difficult. But in Pacific Symphony, I think once you're in a certain place and you realize the timing and who you're sitting with and stuff like that, it can be less difficult. But in some orchestras where every week you're in a different chair, that can be difficult. I fully agree. And the distance and the time, and sometimes you don't hear the conductor as clearly when he asks for specifics, and you're like, what did you say? And then you're already on to the next thing. So these things are difficult. And sitting in the front, those things are of course not an issue. Right. That being said, you know, us in the front, we have more responsibility and we feel like we have to lead more in the front. But I fully agree with Jeannie. In the back, it's tough, sometimes more difficult than in the front. But I think, you know, you have to learn how to play everywhere. I think both of us in our lives have played all over New York. I remember starting when I was 5 years old, I played third violin because we had no viola. So I was a 5-year-old playing third violin. We have one more question before we end. Let's see. From Jeannie's students. Andres. How do you all perform during the pandemic? I've seen a few videos of Pacific Symphony playing Beethoven. How did you stay together? I think, yeah. So please.
So we had a click track, but we also had video, actual video of Carl St. Clair conducting a performance of this. I think you're talking about the Beethoven 7, yeah. The mosaic one that we did. And so we had both going on, and so you could sort of choose between the click track and what you were looking at. I actually personally found it difficult to go by what I was looking at because it wasn't exactly, and so I went by the click track, and that's how we did it. Each of us individually had to work with a click track to play it. It was hard. It was also scary playing that alone and realizing somebody's going to listen to this.
No, it's like we talked about Zoom and technology. It's not natural because there is a click track, but you know, no one feels music like that metronomically, and that's why music is special, because it breathes. And in the same phrase, in the same tempo, there's still so much push and pull. And when you're having 80 people trying to push and pull over a Zoom and over click track, it's very difficult. But everyone's trying their best, and and I guess, you know, this isn't going away tomorrow, so we have to keep on improving. But
Yeah.
it's all new to us. It's all new for us, and it's difficult, but we're trying our best. Um, First of all, I'd like to thank you so much, Jeannie, for joining us today. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us.
Mhm.
Both Jeannie and I can't wait to be back on stage. You have no idea how difficult it is for us not to be performing, not to see your faces, not to see the clapping, and it's, I mean, it's just
Oh,
it's
yeah.
you can't even imagine for us, because that's why we do what we do, you know, to play for you, to make music together, of course, but for a live audience and to get that feedback. That's
We
what we
feed off of it. It comes back to us. And
right. And not only Jeannie and I, but Carl and everyone in the orchestra, we we miss desperately to play for you, and we all hope that it'll be sooner rather than later that we play for all of you guys. And when that day comes, I hope you guys join us. And it's gonna be a very special time. That first time we're on stage with all the audience, I think everyone will have a tear in their eye. And I mean, even thinking about it right now, it gives me goosebumps.
I
But
know.
thank you so much, Jeannie, for sharing your wonderful life. It's incredible.
My pleasure.
And like I said, I hope to see you on stage very soon.
Me too. Me too.
Thank
Thanks,
you very
Evan.
much.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye.
Bye.